Middle Eastern traditions have much to tell us, much to teach us about a sense of community, these ancient Middle Eastern voices. That we've heard most of these voices, again, strained out through a much more individualistic way of looking and feeling and thinking, is another way in which we've misheard them. The Middle Eastern voices, the ancient Middle Eastern voices, also have much to tell us about how we can feel this sense of community in a deeper way and still keep traveling, still keep evolving or creating something new, how we can keep meeting problems. And this is also very important. Another area of my work has focused on, you could say, the Middle Eastern view of creation and creativity, where we've come from and where we're going. When I was working on one of my books called The Genesis Meditations, I was tempted to issue a press release which said something like this. Today, an Edinburgh scholar of Aramaic and Hebrew has released the news that none of the Middle Eastern prophets, either Jesus or Moses or Muhammad, could have possibly believed in a judgment day as it's currently conceived. And that's in fact true. The entire vision or version of looking at past, present, and future in the ancient Semitic languages, the languages these prophets spoke, would have precluded them even conceiving of a judgment day as people now talk about it. Why can I say this? Well, let's take the case of the creation stories. Creation begins, at least in Genesis, with unknowing. As it says in Genesis 1:2, darkness was on the face of the deep. The first verse of Genesis, usually translated, "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth," is, you could say, sort of the overture of the whole story, like the overture at the beginning of a musical that plays a little bit of all the themes, and then the curtain goes up, the story unfolds. So these ancient storytellers begin it all with darkness. Everything was unformed, it was in void, it was what the Hebrew calls tohu wabohu. It was all in a state of chaotic flux. And then, next comes in the breath, the divine breath, once again, which is called Ruach Elohim in Genesis 1:3. Again, Ruach, the same sort of Ruha that we've simply been chanting. The divine breath stirs around in the unknown a little bit. The chaos, you could say, that which is unformed, that was still becoming. And then, in the next step, after breath makes love with darkness, light happens. And light is not simply, you could say, switching on a light bulb, but light is things are known now. Things are known that were not known previously. What was previously, you could say, mixed up is now known, and what was undistinguished or indistinguishable is now some aspect of diversity. Before it was, you could say, all just undifferentiated. No diversity because it was all sort of like a gray smudge, or a dark gray smudge in the case of Genesis. And the storytellers would say, well, when breath makes love with darkness, breathes deeply into darkness, then light is known. Let there be light, and there was light. But as I just mentioned to you, there is no word in Hebrew or Aramaic that means was or is or will be. So what are they really saying? Well, they're saying that in potential, you could say creation happens first by breathing into what we don't know, rather than what we think we do know. We think we have certain capabilities, certain talents, certain limitations. We think there's, oh no, that couldn't possibly happen. But if we breathe really into our depths with a prayerful breath, something new may arise. Something, you could say, unknown may now be known. So in actual fact, the first 3 or 4 verses of Genesis are describing a very profound Middle Eastern psychology, as well as a creation story. Another example, case 2, creation story 2 from Proverbs. One of rabbis whom I know, once I asked him, well, why are there so many different creation stories in the Hebrew Bible? And he said, well, one of the traditions of the old Jewish mystics was that if you only had one story for something as profound and mysterious as creation, and you tried to limit yourself to that, your brain would explode. So he said, we Jews, we like to have 3 or 4 different versions of a creation story. They weren't necessarily all meant to fit together, but they were all meant to illuminate different teachings, different things which we should remember as we try to live our lives in better connection with each other. Case 2. In Proverbs, creation happens like this. Holy Wisdom, whose voice I read earlier from the Thunder Speaks text, Holy Wisdom throws a dinner party. She breathes, calls, as Genesis described, as Proverbs 8 and 9 describe. Holy Wisdom breathes, she calls some more, and she gathers, you could say, the different pre-beings from the great unknown together. And this gathering of different voices for a dinner party is creation, in this way of looking at it. So in one version, creation is a sort of breathing into darkness. Darkness becomes what is known. You could say like a psychological process. In another version, creation is a gathering process where people are gathered, beings are gathered, and there's room at the table for all. So that was an important story at another time. Really, when we hear the creation stories from a Middle Eastern standpoint, they teach us some very simple things. Valuing this moment with each other. Considering what are we leaving for those behind us. And looking more towards our shared beginnings than any endings where we may find ourselves divided by different ideas about where we're going.